everybody. I'm going to get started right now and just talk a little bit before a zookeeper shows up on the back wall in the back to throw the food over for the chimps. First of all, let's just make sure to make a clear pathway so that anyone can walk through if they need to. And it looks like our zookeepers have arrived. Welcome, zookeepers. Can everyone wave to them over there?
Hi, zookeepers. Look, see, they're up on the wall.
Happy 2019. Thank you for braving the cold today. I know it's a little chilly out there. I've got my gloves ready to go. So you guys joined us at a great time of day to come and observe these chimps. Lunchtime is a really interesting time to watch these guys because the dynamics are very interesting. So they get sometimes really rowdy, sometimes very interactive with one another. So it's a great time of day to come and watch them. And this is also a good time of year to come and see them because a little bit has changed within the dynamics of the group. I'll go into that a little bit later. So before I really get started on talking about the chimps, do you guys know any basic information about these guys? Like what kind of animal they are, where do they live, what do they eat? You can raise your hand. Do you know how much they weigh, how long they live? Yeah. What do chimps eat? What do you see in their exhibit? Everyone can take a look around and see what they're eating here.
Tomatoes.
A potato. I saw a potato, yeah. Apples. So apple is a type of fruit, and we save fruit for special occasions because it is super high in sugar, especially the fruit we have here in America, because us humans really like our sugary fruits. So we save our fruit items for very special occasions like training because they absolutely love that stuff. Onions, they love their onions. The whole raw onion, they love their green onion. That's right. Sometimes I see zucchini in here, maybe beets. So how long do chimps live?
For about 50 or 50 and a little bit.
Maybe a little over 50 years old? That's about right, yeah. They live to about 50 years old. They can be anywhere from 70 to 100, maybe 130 pounds. And their native habitat is rainforest in Africa. So that is where they come from. Do you guys know what kind of animal chimps are? Are they monkeys? That's right, they're apes. Yeah, you guys are awesome at that. Do you guys know the difference between monkeys and apes? Yeah.
Apes have no tails.
Ooh, almost. You were very, very close. Yeah, they've got really good fingers, so they've got an opposable front. Yeah, so between monkeys and apes, if you really want to tell them apart, you take a look at their booty and see if they have a tail on it. If it has a tail, it's most likely an animal. If they don't have a tail, it's most likely an ape, so that's a good way to tell them apart. Besides that, apes just tend to be a lot more intelligent, so they've got larger brain size and a lot more neurons firing off in there. So because they're so intelligent, they have very complex communication with one another. And you can tell that by just observing our chimps and seeing the way they interact and communicate with each other. Before we got started with this lunchtime, you saw them get a little bit loud and vocal, right? They got a little bit rowdy, yeah. That's one of the ways they communicate with one another, is making a lot of loud noises and different vocalizations. They know what those different vocalizations are. And we have more than just the chimps as apes here. We also have orangutans and gorillas here at the zoo too. So those are some of our other apes. We've also got lesser apes like the gibbons here as well. You can take a look at those and compare those to our monkeys. We've got lots of monkeys here. Can you guys tell the younger chimps apart from the older chimps? How can you tell the younger ones from the older ones? I know usually the first thing you notice is the size difference, and that is a good giveaway. But maybe you have an adult that's kind of petite or very small. So how do you know that that's not a young chimp? Well, you basically are going to do the same thing that the chimps do, and you take a look at their skin color and their ears. So they have a lighter, pinker skin tone, as in this chimp right down here, if you guys can see. Or this one climbing here on the stump here, you can see that they have kind of a pinker skin tone. As they grow older, that will turn darker, and that's a visual cue to the rest of their family mates that they're older. So it's very important because they can kind of get away with a lot more naughty behaviors when they're younger. They also don't have to contribute quite as much when they're younger because they're still getting the hang of the ropes. They're still playing around and learning. But as they get older, they're going to have more responsibility. And the chimps, their family mates, will be able to look at them and react. So what other kind of behaviors do you guys see going on in here? Yeah, someone's getting a piggyback ride. So that is a good example of something we call allo-parenting. They live in a hierarchical society, so there's a lot of different family members from different families living all together in one group. They could be anywhere from 5 to 10 individuals up to 100 individuals in a chimpanzee troop. So they all take on that parenting role and they help take care of each other's young because they're all one big family, although they might not be blood related directly. So if you see someone, an individual chimp giving another a piggyback ride, that might not necessarily mean it's its parent. It could be a sibling or an aunt or even a friend, just helping to take care of that younger one. So like I said, these guys live in multi-family groups, so there's a lot of different relativity and relations between the individuals in the troop. There's a lot of different ages and multiple genders in a group, so there's a lot of dynamics that can go on. And they're very social animals. So compared to other animals such as a jaguar, which is solitary, they're going to have a different way of living. So jaguars will live by themselves typically, compared to elephants who live in a matriarch, so the women are in charge, they are the leaders of their group. And compared back to chimpanzees, they live in a hierarchical society. So they're going to have an alpha male who basically makes decisions for their troop and kind of leads that group there. And there's different ways to become an alpha chimp within their group. You can just kind of prove to the other ones that you're big and strong and you make good decisions, or you can try a different technique of maybe making friends with everybody. But essentially it's up to your whole group to decide who is the alpha. So it's not necessarily who is the biggest and strongest, and it's not necessarily always a male chimp. Sometimes it can be a female. So here we've had a very dominant group. We have about 15 chimps, and each male has each had their time of being the alpha, so it's fluid. It kind of switches back and forth. There's not just one set alpha, kind of like a king or a prince of a country. So do you guys see any other behavior going on here?
I see climbing.
They're doing a lot of eating, so they're peeling off their fruit. They're just kind of relaxing and eating their lunchtime. So I was mentioning earlier that the zookeeper stands up above that wall, and they do something called a free feeding. So it's really fun to watch and very interesting. And they stand up there behind that wall for a reason, and they do that feeding for a very good reason. So there's a method to the madness here. They are going to make sure that they throw the food over to our alpha male or our alpha chimp first, as to not cause any disturbances within the group. Because if they were to throw the food first to the less dominant chimps, that might cause some problems and maybe some arguments within their chimp society, and we don't want to do that. We want to let them solve their own behaviors and just kind of act as natural as possible. So we don't want to throw a monkey wrench in their dynamics here. So the other benefit to doing the free feeding, standing up there and throwing the food over to the chimps, is that the zookeeper can get a nice view of everybody and make sure everyone's getting their fair share of food. Typically they throw over more food than necessary. That way everyone can get a nice kind of variety of food. They can pick and choose their favorite food from everything that they're given. There are also a couple chimps that can have certain foods. For example, our chimp Nan can't have too much sugar. She has her own version of diabetes, very similar to what humans would have, so they've really got to watch their their sugar intake. So the keeper being up there and choosing who's going to get the fruit, they can make sure that man doesn't get it. So they can really control that. So I mentioned earlier that the dynamics have been very interesting lately, and that's because two of our chimps